bunch of times that one of the key things and what determines what good software development is about is the ability to maintain it, the ability to make changes to something. Because we know change is inevitable. I mean, I guess this is where this starts to sound like a philosophy class, right? But it doesn't matter. Something's going to change in the future, all right? You might have to fix a problem, for example. You might have a bug in your code, and you have to go back and change it. Maybe something is not calculated correctly. You're calculating shipping charges, and you make a mistake in it. Or maybe the law changes. You know, if you're doing a payroll system, if you're working on a payroll system, and the tax law changes, you have to change your code to make it work. You have to change it to make it work. Maybe something about the organization changes. Maybe two companies merge, for example. And you know, one company buys out another company. That's certainly very common these days. And therefore, you have to maybe change websites to accommodate the new part of the organization. So change comes for a variety of reasons, and that's always been the case in software development. So most of what we do in terms of saying, like, this is a good idea to do it this way, or this is a good practice to do it this way, is geared around making it easier to change. All right? That's usually what it translates to. Not always necessarily, but that's what it usually translates to. Think back to web development. We created HTML files and we created a CSS file separate. Why did we do that? Well, because we could put one CSS file on all our HTML files. If we wanted to change the look of the entire site, we just go and change one of the files and the entire site gets changed. All right? So maintainability. You know, we change our color scheme, or we want to have our site have a seasonal look to it. So as the seasons change, we change from summer colors to autumn colors or whatever. In terms of using the .NET Framework, we use the .NET Framework because it provides us a set of components that are consistent and reliable. And if we do that, the thought is that it'll be easier to change stuff as opposed to code that we write on our own. We then talked about creating custom classes, like we did for the dice game. The whole idea of that is now if we have to do any other dice game, we have a component sitting out there ready to go. All right? We don't have to do the whole thing from scratch. We can use our dice component to make another game. I attempted to do that last time, Thursday, at least start of it, and there was a bug. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to fix the bug first of all. It was really kind of an odd bug to have. Yes?
I had a question. There was a dice game in the high-low.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting the user interface, the function, and only one thing. And it seemed like there was 6 instead of 5 things.
I don't know what you mean as far as 6 what instead of 5 what.
One page should have done the calculations for both, and it looked like they each had their own calculation thing. So I was wondering how this one talked to the other.
Well,
I didn't see it.
Well, it depends on what version you're looking at. We can pull that up here in a second, and I can show you what happens. The way that the way that we've got consistency between the two pages is they use a common custom class. So there's 2 user interfaces, but the logic of the game is actually in the custom class. So let's pull that up and we can take a look at that to start out. And we can fix our bug just to have kind of closure on that. So the most recent version of it was this. Oh, and you can't see that. Is our example for 913, which will extract. Okay, then I'll open it up in Visual Studio. Okay, we have actually two versions of the dice game. We have default and default 2. And if we look at the code for this, the only code that we're going to see in both of these is the code which connects the user interface with the code in our custom class. So notice that the event has only a tiny bit of code in it. We create the class, we call some functions on the class, on the object, we get the return values, and then we display the results. So that's all the user interface does. The code in the code behind is sort of the glue between the user interface and our business rules or our problem domain rules. The logic for the game is all in this high-low game, where we actually have the 2 dice, we roll the 2 dice, we look to see what the user's choice was, we compare that with what the total of the dice is, and then we determine if they've won or lost. And if we notice, both of these have a very similar code in their code behind. The only difference is one of them's getting the value from a drop-down, one gets the value from a radio button. One displays images to show the results, one displays labels to get the results. So that's how the two don't talk to each other in that sense. They both talk to a third party. They both talk to the high-low game custom class. And that's how the pages communicate together. Now again, in earlier versions of this, I think I did have the code in both places, because I was demonstrating why that's a bad idea to have the code in both places. What we did in the final version is we brought everything together into the custom class and made sure both of the user interfaces use the custom class to do their calculation. So that's how both of them have the rules of the game and tie it to their user interface. Now, where we left off last time was with our Yahtzee game, and to refresh your memory on that one, we'll set that on the start page. It was also a dice game, and the way we had it was the first time you roll, it rolls all 5, then you can pick which ones you roll. And we noticed something funny about this. Notice that it's always given me a full house. All right, the first, third, and fifth are always the same. And if I click and say re-roll, it re-rolls all of them. Okay. So what's wrong with this? Actually, it's keeping these three the same and re-rolling these two. What's wrong with this is a silly mistake that I made, probably when I copied and pasted. When I get the dice image, I get the image of the dice for dice 1, dice 2, then I must have copied and pasted, and I get dice 1 and dice 2 again. This should be dice 3 and dice 4. And then this should be dice 5. And likewise here, this should be dice 1, dice 2, dice 3, dice 4, dice 5. So now it should work closer to the way we expect it to. All right, now notice it doesn't match that pattern. If I say I want to re-roll these three should stay the same. Okay, there they do. Look, I may have made another change in this. Each of these static. So we roll it, we get that. Let's say I want to re-roll these two. Those two changed, and the other one stayed the same. So that's the behavior I wanted to. Now again, the high-low game and the Yahtzee game are different, right? But they have the same common component of the dice object. So therefore, I didn't have to build the dice object when I went to create the Yahtzee game. That was sort of the lesson of that. All right, questions about this? I have a question for you folks then. What should we make a website about? What should the next example be about? Not a dice game, but just pick a topic. What are you studying in some of your other classes? What are you interested in? What are you not interested in? I'm not giving up here. We'll sit here the rest of the day, if that's what it takes. I used to live alone for a long time, and now I live with 5 other people. All right? So peace and quiet is something that's very valuable to me. So if we can't think of anything, I'll happily sit here quietly for the next 45 minutes. Yes?
Let's go with retro toys.
Retro toys, excellent example. Let's do a page about retro toys. All right? So, retro toys. What subpage pages would we have underneath that?
Decades.
Decades. Perfect. All right, I love this idea. So, let me sketch out what our site might look like. So, a tribute to the toys from our childhood. Oh, I love that. I was actually watching on YouTube this weekend old cartoons and old Saturday morning cartoons, and they were like showing the whole cartoon. They would like just show like the theme song and the music, and so they were like not any of these newfangled mutant teenage turtle things. They were like the old ones, you know, like Adamant and what are some of the other ones? Quick Draw McGraw and all those really old ones. But so I like this topic. So, what do you think we would run on our home page? Maybe a picture of something. All right. I'm going to say a picture of a robot. Kind of looks like King Kong, but we'll give him antennas so you know it's a robot. So picture of a robot. And then we'll have our navigation. So our navigation will be based on decades. All right? So this is our home page. And our navigation might be 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, 2010s. So that'll be our home page. Okay? So it's our home page. Each of our content pages is going to look the same, right? And then we might have a footer here. Contact us with any questions. And we might have, our content page might look like this. Should have a link back to home too. I'm just going to put nav here so I don't have to write everything out. And then this might be our 1960s page. And maybe we have Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Paragraph about them. Maybe we have some other toys. What would be a good 60s toy?
Cooties.
Pardon me?
Cooties.
Cooties. Picture. I picked the wrong decade, right? Only a few of us are going to be able to participate in the discussion of this. All right? And then we'd have the same footer on the bottom. Now, let's imagine if we were doing this, and each of our decade pages are going to look like this. Right? Now, imagine if we were doing this in CISS 216. All right? If we were doing this in CISS 216, what would we do? We would go and we would make a template. We'd go and we'd make maybe the home page first. All right? And would make sure that the common parts of the page, that we had that down. Right? That we had that exactly the way we would want it to be. What are the common parts of the page? This, 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 and this. So we would make sure that we had that down. Perfect. All right? And then when we had that exactly the way we wanted to, we would go and we would clone it. And we'd make our 1950s page, our 1960s page, 1970s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010. Right? And we would just change then the section of the page that was different. So, maybe I'll color code it here. The blue stuff is common on every page. The green stuff is different on each page. So we would get a template where we made sure the common stuff was right. Okay? And then we would clone it. And clone it for each of the pages that we had. All right? Now, that's probably what you did in CISS243 for your project. You probably did something like that. And that was a good procedure to follow. Except, what happens if you decided you missed something in the footer, for example? Or you missed something in the navigation? Or you missed something in the header? You would have to go back and change all the clones, all the different versions of that. Well, that's duplicated effort, right? Because we had duplicated code, right? No screen? Okay, exactly. Because we have duplicated code, the problem is if we have to go back and change it, we have to change it in a bunch of different places. The CSS, we're okay with, right? Because when we made this file, when we made our initial template, we put the CSS in its own file, right? So we're okay if we have to change that. But if we had to change any of the HTML content, we'd have to go and change every code, and the code in every page, because we've copied that page over and over again. We've propagated duplicate code. All right. Now, there's several solutions to this, depending on the platform that you're on. The solution for this in ASP.NET is to create what are called master pages. All right? Keep in mind, the whole idea of ASP.NET is to make your job as a web developer easy. And one of the main aspects of that to make it easy is to provide you components that do common things. All right? Components that do common things, like validation. There's a component that does validation. There's a component that allows you to take and put common code of your web page in a separate file, much like we do with CSS. And then, instead of literally copying the page, we define a master page and say that every page uses this as its basis. And then all we have to code on each individual page is the section of it that's different. So, let's go in and let's create first a master page for this. Then we will create our home page, and then we will create our other pages. All right? And we'll see that if we have to make a change, we're in a better position because we don't have to change all our pages. We only have to change the master page. So, I'm going to go new project. It's going to be a web project, and we're still going to use the empty website. I'm going to put it on the desktop, and I'm going to call it Retro Toys. Again, please edit the names. Don't simply take the default names. All right? That'll help you as well as helping me. All right? So we go, and it's going to be using C#. And we can click OK. And the project. We have an empty project, corresponds to a file on the desktop. And we have a web config, and so on. So, let's start off. Normally, we would go up to File, New, File, and create a web form. We are instead going to create a master page. It's sort of like creating a web form. The rules are the same, but it's a web form that we can easily clone, all right, and easily base another page off of. So I'm going to just say main master page. I'll just call it main. Why not? In this example, I probably will only have one master page, right? Because my website is pretty simple. It's not like I have, hundreds of pages. It's possible in a large website that you might have several master pages. All right? For example, if you ever went to LC's website, if we go to certain places on the website, let me pick a good one. If we go to academic resources, and we pick apply and register. Or we go to apply to LC, register. All the pages in this section have this in common and have this in common. All right? Every page on the site has this in common, this very top thing, and probably has in common the very bottom footer. But pages in the academic or admissions and enrollment section have that in common, which all pages do, the footer in common, which all pages do, but they also have the sidebar in common, which only pages in academic, or why do I keep saying academic? Admissions and enrollment have in common, right? So this page might have its own, this section might have its own master page, and the whole site might have its own master page, all right? We can nest them, we can combine them. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but just to say, in my case, it's a simple enough website that we're only going to really have one master page, all right? So I click Add here, and I get a master page. And it looks a lot like a regular web page, except it has two different sections that we haven't seen in any other page before. It has content placeholders. All right? Other than that, it's like a regular web page. But it has two content placeholders that go together, and these are the areas that are different for each page. Anything outside of the content placeholders is going to be the code that is common on every page. The content placeholders are sort of blanks in our template that we're going to fill in with specifics for that particular page. All right? We can have as many of these content placeholders as we want. By default, they give us two. The thought is, well, you're going to have a section in your header, you're going to have a section in the body. It's specific for this page. All right? Now, in our case, let's remember back to what our page looks like. I know it's a little hard to see, but I don't want to turn off the projector. have a section at the top, a section at the bottom, and a blank space in the middle. So this is going to be the content placeholder section of our page. This is going to be above it. This is going to be below it. All right. So I'm just going to start coding the HTML for the common portions of the screen. And it is not going to be in the content placeholder, right? Because a content placeholder is a placeholder, it's a blank space that we're going to put the code specific to this page in. So what appears on every page? Well, we have a header section with an H1 that says Retro Toys. Then we have a paragraph that says Toys, a page that celebrates toys from your childhood. Okay. We then have our navigation. Now I'm going to do navigation by hand right now, just to get through this. Later on we'll see a different way to do the navigation. But for now we're going to do navigation just like we were in CISS243 by hand. Because what? Navigation is something that every website has, right? So we might expect there to be a component to help us with the navigation. But we're not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to make a plain old unordered list that contains a list of my web pages. I know my home page is going to be called default.aspx. If you noticed, before I put that link in an LI, the A was green underlined. Did you see that? What does that mean? It means that you can't have an A tag directly inside a UL tag. So consider this to be like a little bit of a grammar check, right? It's validating to make sure you don't break the rules of HTML. It doesn't mean you can't have a link in a list. It just means that if you have a link in a list, it needs to be within an LI tag. And then I'm going to put all my pages here in my navigation underneath it. Okay, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Right? This is code we want on every single page. So it goes on the master page. What else is code that we want on every single page? The footer. Okay. One thing I try to do when I do pages like this is remind you of stuff in HTML and CSS that maybe you've forgotten if you haven't done a lot of coding. So you can make a mail to link if you want. And that will open up the user's email client and allow them to send an email to you, or me in this case. All right, so we can view this in design mode to see what it looks like. All right, that's what the page looks like. Looks like we have some stray tags here, so let me go in, get rid of that. I could create a CSS and apply it to this, right? Might as well. So I'll go File, New, File, Style Sheet. It's my main CSS, so I'll call main. Add, and I'll do something like font family, let's try that one. I will say header, with 60% margin, zero auto. And I'll do the same thing for nav. Nav Section and Footer. I'll go back to my master page. I'm going to change this div to a section. Simply because the div is sort of an old school way to do it. It's a pre-HTML5. We might as well do it the HTML5 way. That would be a section. Then I'm going to apply the style sheet to this guy. Give it a title. The key thing is we're not going to put any code in the content placeholder because that is not the common code. That's not the code that appears on every single page. All right? That is the code that's distinct to a specific page. So on our master page, we put nothing in the placeholders. We leave them empty. Apparently you don't need this anymore, but I always put it in. All right. And if we look at the design, that's what it looks like. Okay. Now, you might say, gee, I don't like the fact how these are oriented. All right. And I don't like the bullet points next to them. Well, we can easily enough correct that by changing the style. Still a list, right? Still a list of links, the nav is. But I can say UL list style type none. LI display inline block. You can probably even do a little better than that. Because I might have ULs on other parts of the page that I don't want styled that way. So I'm going to say nav UL, nav LI. So within my nav section, I want the ULs and LIs to look a certain way. So now we go back to here, and that's what it looks like. Of course, it's all ran together. So I could put a margin on the LIs. And specifically, I could do a margin left 10 pixels. That spaces them out. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. All right. We can't view this in the browser, right? Because this is not a web page. It sure looks like a web page, right? But it's not. It's a master page. It's a component that we are going to use when we build other pages. So to view this in the browser, we have to build at least one page. So let's build our home page. All right. So for here, I'm going to go and do most of what I did before, except I'm going to make sure one of the one box is checked that we have not checked before. So I'm going to say New File, Web Form. I'm going to call it default.aspx, but I'm going to click Select a Master Page. That allows us, that says, hey, I'm going to make a new page, but use this guy as the starting point. Use this guy as sort of the shell of the page, for which we're just going to fill in the blanks. So we don't have to code the header again, the nav again. All that's in the master page. We just code the differences. We just code the stuff that isn't in the master page, the stuff that's unique to this page. So I click Add. It'll ask us what master page we want to use. Well, we only have one, so pretty easy choice. And now we get something that almost looks like the reverse of the master page. Instead of content placeholders, we get content tags. And that's all we get. So in the master page, we put stuff, we don't put anything in those placeholders. Here, we put everything within those content tags. So this is where we put the stuff that is distinct to this page. All right? So title. I can put retro toys home page. This is the one that corresponds to the head. This is the one that corresponds to the body. Right at this moment, I don't have anything. The one that corresponds to stuff that isn't. I want to put a nice picture of a robot. So, toy robot. It'll be a miracle if I spend less than 20 minutes picking the best robot to appear on here. So bear with me. Let's look at that. On the other hand, maybe we found the right one the first try. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to go here. So I can get the URL to give a credit for it, right? And I'm going to go to my home page. I am going to create in here a folder called Images. I'll put that image inside there. Oh, here we go. Go back to my home page. I'm going to say image from. That way, if the FBI is watching this, all right, video, they'll see that I'm following fair use guidelines within an educational context. made a link to it. And I go over here. I move stuff over since I first opened this. So I'm going to click the refresh. And I get my images. And I'll put an image tag here. I could put an image tag here. Or I could put an ASP.NET image tag here. It really doesn't matter. Right now, I have no plans to program this image. You know what I mean? I have no plans to like cycle through images on the server side or randomly pick a toy. But that might be a cool idea later on, right? So I'm going to use an ASP.NET image control because that is easier to program on the server side. And then I'm going to say image URL. Doesn't like that. It's weird. Not sure why it gave me, it went away when I ran it, so that's weird. Now I'm seeing the default page. All right. And the code comes from two places on this default page. The code comes from a combination of, actually, well, the code I guess comes from two pages. It comes from a combination of the main master page and from default ASPX. This is the code that is on the page itself, right? This other stuff is on the master page, all right? Make sense? Yes.
For the content placeholders, would you ever need more than the two they give you? Or,
Sure, sure.
And if you do change that on the master page, would it intuitively change it to any created files, or would you have to recreate the file or edit yourself?
If you add an extra content placeholder, and remind me, we'll do that at some point. First of all, yeah, you're bound to have a case where you want more than one. Again, think of common sections of a page, or think of distinct sections of the page. You know, it's very likely that you might have some stuff here, some stuff there, some stuff there, where it makes sense to have different content placeholders because it might be strewn throughout the page. Here, all our content is smack dab here. All right, you might have stuff all over the place on the page. So yeah, it's perfect. The pages you generated, it would reflect the new content placeholder. That I'll have to check out though, because I'm basing that on memory of 6 months ago, the last time I did this. All right. Okay. So cool. What if I want to change this? What if I? Well, let's make a second page. Let's make another page, and we're going to get Rock'em Sock'em Robots. Heck, might as well embed a video, right? In fact, let's look for the original commercial. $19.75. Oh boy. I'm going to cry if there's no audio here. so what we're going to do is we're going to build our 70s page. Actually, that had it from the 70s. I thought it was an older toy than that, but I guess accuracy doesn't, that's not.
That second video, if you go back, the second video looked like it was sent from the 60s.
Okay, all right. Things were so weird back then, And we didn't even recognize it, right? Let's see, share, embed. Okay, we'll leave this here. So let's go make our 60s page. So we're going to make our 60s page the same way, basically, that we made our default page, right? So I'm going to go up to here, File, New, File, and I'm going to pick a web form. And I give it a name. Remember, I put names in the master page already. So part of this requires you to sort of plan ahead and think what pages you're going to have and all that. The good news is if you're wrong, you can always go back and change the master page, and it's changed everywhere. But I called this 1960s. I'm going to select the master page again. I want the main master. Again, I get the same thing. I can change the title. And I can put my content area in H1. And I'm just going to go and copy the link from YouTube. Put it in here. We also want the Cooties game.
When it comes to toys, money doesn't always equal fun. You can give a child a $10 gift, and sometimes it'll end up on the floor, and the child will be playing with the box. That's not likely to happen with toys and games made by Shopper, the Cooties.
An expensive $10 gift, yeah.
Pickle-Bee or Cooties, but simple, inexpensive, and fun.
Now, every Shopper game includes this warranty card. Play Shopper within 90 days and defective parts or game replaced free. You can trust the Cootie Company.
Oh my God. So let's go embed this. I don't feel need to put credit given that these are links to YouTube and it's obvious that this came from YouTube. And the person that posted it probably did not follow copyright laws either, so I don't feel too obligated to.
Bob gives real solutions to Ohio's opioid epidemic.
What?
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. Sorry, Bob, not in my class. No offense. I mean, he probably has working on a solution to a worthwhile problem, if that is indeed true. But I'll just be quiet now. All right. So. Now we run this. And we get that. We go back to our home page, we get that. So notice our page already has a consistent look to it, which is a good thing, right? I mean, it's good. That's one of the hallmarks of good web page design, is that your pages have a consistent look and feel. So people don't have to figure out what the navigation is or whatever. You teach people about your site by having a consistent look and feel. Now just imagine if we have to make some changes. Let's say I think, well, you know, let's put a border around the header. All right. Well, how do we make that change? I want to put a border around the header.
Change the CSS.
Change the CSS. It's a change of appearance. We have a single CSS file that controls this as of now. So we can go in here and have the header have a border 5 pixels, solid red. All right, there we go. All right, we probably should throw some padding in there too. Okay, and it's on every page. All right, I've only made these 2 pages, so if we click on these, we're going to get an error, saying that page doesn't exist. But if we want to change the appearance of the page, we change the CSS. If we want to change the content of the common section, we change the master file. So let's say, for example, I want to expand on this paragraph. I think, well, that paragraph's a little weak, so maybe I'm going to change it. So that is common content. It's on every page, and therefore it would be in the master page. So I could go and change that to say, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, but never lost my love of the toys of that era. I created this site to celebrate that my kids play with. Okay, so it's common content. I change it in the master page. It's on the home page. It is on the 60s page as well. I didn't have to go and copy and paste and potentially make a mistake or forget one or whatever. So it's in that place. All right. Now, if there's something I wanted to include in the 60s page, well, of course I have to go and change that page individually, right? But, of course you do. That content is distinct to that page, right? So if I want a paragraph about the Rock'em Sock'em robots and how one of my Rock'em Sock'em robots over time developed a glass jaw, all right? In other words, it was more prone to fly off the body of the robot than the other one, especially if you punch too hard. So the trick was always to give your opponent that one, and then you use a good one, and you would win a high proportion of your matches. All right. So if I want to include a paragraph that said that, of course I have to make that change to the 60s page, because that's not common to other pages, right? So right now, we got it covered where we do the least work possible, right? And that's good, right? It's funny, and this is probably, if you're going to psychologically analyze me, why I like software development and why I went into it. Because in software development, if you figure out a way to do less work, that's a good thing, right? Whereas in a lot of other fields, it's like, no, work hard, work hard, work hard. It's like with this, it's like, no, the task is really to figure out a way so you don't have to work hard, all right? And that's what we're doing here. We're using components that allow us to minimize the work that we're going to have to do in the future. That is the work for the software, the work for the change of the software. Why is that? Well, we saw that graph last time. The further along you go in a project, the more expensive it becomes to make the change. We're trying to flatten that out a little bit, so it doesn't take too much effort to make any changes we want to for that. Now's a good time to stop. There's some other things that we can do. We could talk about making multiple master pages. We'll probably do that Thursday. We'll talk about some of the navigation things probably Thursday as well, because I just coded my navigation control simply. And, there's actually built-in navigation controls that we can use to do what we want. So we'll look at those next time as well. But now's a good time to start. Needless to say, pretty much for every assignment here on in, you want to start with a master page and then have that, because Lab 5, I think that is the assignment, to make a master page and clone it and make a little mini website. Lab 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 are going to start with a basic web page and then expand on it. We're going to do one page, and then you're going to do a second page, and then a third page, and we're always going to be adding on to it, so it's going to be an accumulated assignment. So for that, it would be a good idea to start right off the bat with a master page. That way, it's easy to add pages to that, to the navigation, and you can navigate around your site. I will include that in the instructions, though, when I post that assignment. All right, that's all I had. We'll see you in lab. I'll unlock the door. I'll come back here to get my files, and then I'll be back in lab.